Have you ever felt frustrated trying to pronounce English words correctly? You're not alone. Welcome to today's episode, where we're diving into one of the most essential skills for mastering English, pronunciation. Imagine walking into a room full of English speakers and confidently expressing your thoughts without the fear of being misunderstood. Sounds appealing, right? In this episode, we'll explore practical tips and techniques that will help you sound more fluent and natural in your English conversations. So, whether you're a beginner or looking to polish your skills, stay tuned to unlock the secrets of perfect pronunciation.
All right, let's jump into a deep dive on English pronunciation. You sent in the Oxford Language Club's blog post, Mastering English Pronunciation, Tips and Techniques, and, well, you want to speak more clearly and confidently, right?
Makes sense.
Exactly. So we'll take a look at the techniques they laid out, which are super fascinating. This isn't just the usual stuff. It's about getting why we pronounce things the way we do, not just how.
That's the key, actually. I mean, we could just give you a ton of drills, but without the foundation, the why, it just won't stick.
Yeah, it'd be like building a house on sand.
Exactly.
Wow.
And this post gets right to the foundation, starting with phonetics.
Okay, so they talk about this idea of cracking the code using phonetics and using something called the IPA.
Right, the International Phonetic Alphabet.
Big IPA, yeah.
Basically, it's like a giant map of every sound humans can make when they speak.
Okay.
Like, think about it. The letters we use in English, they don't always match the sounds they're supposed to make.
Right. English spelling can be all over the place.
Exactly. But with the IPA, each symbol means just one specific sound. So it doesn't matter what language you're learning, you can use the IPA to see exactly how to pronounce it.
Like a universal sound translator.
Yeah, exactly.
That would have been handy to know earlier.
For sure.
Okay, moving on. The post also talks about mimicking native speakers.
Yeah.
And how important that is.
Mimicry. So it's not just about parroting, right? You've got to really listen to the nuances, how native speakers say words and phrases, paying attention to their rhythm, their intonation, all that.
And I guess a good way to practice that is through shadowing, like when you listen to a recording and try to speak along with them at the same time.
Yeah, shadowing's fantastic for that. It helps your ears and your mouth work together, and it can really boost your fluency.
Absolutely. Now, the post also brings up something called minimal pairs. What are those exactly?
Oh, minimal pairs. Those are words that are only different by one sound.
Oh.
Like, think of ship and sheep, or leave and live.
Ah, I see.
They're really useful for zeroing in on those subtle differences that can trip up non-native speakers.
So by practicing these minimal pairs, you're basically training your brain to hear and then make those tricky sounds accurately.
Exactly. And it's not just about getting the sounds right on their own. The post goes on to say how important it is to master the rhythm and flow of English.
Right, because it's not just about pronouncing each word perfectly, right? It's how you put them together in a sentence, how you use stress and intonation to get your meaning across.
You got it. English is what's called a stress-timed language.
Okay.
Meaning that where we put the emphasis on syllables in a word or a sentence, that's what determines the rhythm. We don't give every syllable equal weight.
I see.
It's kind of like music, right?
Yeah.
A song has a specific rhythm and beat, which makes it flow and sound good. English works in a similar way. The stressed syllables make the beat, and unstressed ones sort of fall in between.
So mastering that rhythm, that stress timing, is crucial for sounding more natural, more like a fluent English speaker.
Totally essential. When people don't get the stress patterns right, it can sound, choppy or almost robotic. But when you nail the stress, your speech flows smoothly, and you sound way more confident and natural.
Like learning to dance to the music of the language.
Exactly.
Now, the post also mentions intonation.
Right.
Another big piece of English pronunciation. Can you break that down a bit?
Intonation. That's like the music of our voices, how our pitch rises and falls. We use it to express emotions, to ask questions, even to signal like tiny shades of meaning.
So it's not just what you say, but how you say it. Intonation can completely change what a sentence means.
Exactly. Think about a simple sentence like, it's raining. If you say it with a flat intonation, it's just a fact. But if your voice goes up at the end, it becomes a question. It's raining.
And even if you don't change the words themselves, you can use your intonation to express different emotions, right? Like, it's raining, all excited, or it's raining, all disappointed.
You got it. Intonation adds a whole layer of richness to communication, something non-native speakers often find tricky.
So mastering both stress timing and intonation is key to sounding more natural and fluent in English.
It's the dynamic duo, for sure. They work together to create that rhythm and music of English speech. And the blog post offers some practical advice on how to practice those elements.
Yeah, they talk about mimicking native speakers, which we touched on earlier, and also listening to recordings, paying close attention to how native speakers use stress and intonation.
Excellent strategies. And I'd add that shadowing, which we mentioned earlier, can be really helpful for practicing both stress timing and intonation.
Because with shadowing, you're not just focusing on pronouncing the words right, you're also trying to copy the speaker's rhythm and the way their voice rises and falls.
Exactly. It's like a full body workout for your pronunciation muscles.
I like that. Now, thinking about our listeners specifically, are there any techniques or exercises you'd recommend for someone wanting to improve their stress timing and intonation?
Well, based on what you've shared, I'd say it's helpful to really analyze and practice the stress patterns in sentences that are relevant to you. You know, things you say in everyday life or at work.
So maybe take some phrases or sentences you use often and break them down, figure out which syllables are stressed.
Precisely. Then you can practice those sentences, making sure you get the stress right. Recording yourself can help too, so you can compare your pronunciation to a native speaker's.
Good idea. And for intonation, I guess it's helpful to pay attention to how native speakers use their voices to express different emotions. Maybe even exaggerate those intonations at first, just to get the feel of it.
That's a good tip. Don't be afraid to play around with your voice. Experiment. The more you practice, the easier it'll get.
And it's important to remember that getting better at pronunciation, it's a journey, not a race. You'll have moments where you stumble, maybe feel frustrated. But the key is to be patient, keep practicing, and celebrate each little win you have along the way.
Absolutely. It's all about progress, not perfection. And the benefits of mastering English pronunciation, they're worth the effort.
Totally. Being able to speak English clearly and confidently opens so many doors.
Yeah, you can connect with people from all over, share your ideas, your stories, and really experience all these different English-speaking cultures.
It's pretty amazing. Now, one more time, because the blog post mentions it again, and I think it's worth repeating. It talks about getting feedback on your pronunciation.
Feedback is crucial for growth. It's like having a coach to guide you, help you pinpoint areas to improve.
And it doesn't have to be formal, like from a teacher or a language partner.
Right.
Like we said before, record yourself, listen back, be your own critic, and even use online tools to get feedback.
Exactly. There are tons of resources out there these days. You just have to take the initiative and look for those opportunities.
And remember, feedback is a gift. It's a chance to learn and get better.
Totally. Embrace it, learn from it, and keep moving forward on your pronunciation journey.
Now, before we move on from this rhythm and flow section,
Yeah.
I'm curious about any common mistakes you see non-native speakers make when it comes to stress timing and intonation.
One very common one is stressing the wrong syllable in a word. Often, that's because they're trying to use the stress patterns from their own language, which usually doesn't work in English.
Right, different languages have different stress patterns.
Exactly. Another common mistake is speaking in a monotone, without enough variation in pitch. This can make their speech sound flat and, well, kind of boring. It can even make it hard for listeners to understand what they mean.
So it's really important to pay attention to both where the stress falls and how your voice rises and falls, that intonation, in order to communicate well in English.
Absolutely. And one last thing, mastering stress timing and intonation can actually make speaking English more fun.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, when you know how to use stress and intonation effectively, you can inject more expression and personality into your speech. You can emphasize certain words or phrases to really drive your point home and use intonation to convey your emotions, your attitude.
It's like adding spices to your cooking.
Exactly. It takes your English from bland to flavorful.
I like that. So it's not just about sounding more natural and fluent, it's also about enjoying the language more.
You got it. And the more you enjoy speaking English, the more you'll practice and the faster you'll see progress.
Great point to end on.
So, picking up on that idea of understanding the why, the post digs into this concept of English being a stress-timed language. This can be tricky for non-native speakers.
It definitely makes English sound different from a lot of other languages. What does it even mean, stress-timed?
Well, it means that the rhythm of English, how it sounds when someone's speaking, it's all determined by where those stressed syllables land. We don't pronounce every syllable in a word or sentence with the same emphasis. We pick certain ones to emphasize, and that's what creates the beat, the pulse of the language.
So it's more than just saying each word right. It's about understanding where the emphasis goes within the words and the whole sentence.
Exactly. Like think of music.
Yeah.
A song's got rhythm, a beat, and that's what makes it flow and sound good, right? English is similar. Those stressed syllables, they create the beat, and the unstressed ones kind of fall into place around them.
That's a really good analogy. I bet mastering that stress timing is super important for sounding natural and fluent when you speak English.
Oh, it's essential. If you don't get those stress patterns right, it can sound, choppy or like a robot talking, but get the stress right and boom, your speech just flows and you sound so much more confident, natural.
It's like you're dancing to the rhythm of the language.
That's it.
Now, the blog post mentions intonation too, which is another key part of pronunciation. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Intonation, it's basically the music of our voices.
Okay.
How high or low our voice goes, that's the pitch. And we use it for all sorts of things. Expressing emotions, asking questions, even signaling these subtle nuances and meaning.
So it's not just the words you say, it's how you say them. Intonation can totally change the meaning of a sentence.
Exactly. Think about, let's say, it's raining. If you say it all flat, no change in tone, it's just a statement. But if your voice goes up at the end, bam, it's a question, it's raining.
You don't even need to change the words, right? You can use intonation to express different feelings, like it's raining, super excited, or it's raining, all disappointed.
You got it. It adds so much depth to communication, but a lot of non-native speakers have trouble with it.
So nailing both that stress timing and intonation is really important to sound more natural and fluent in English.
They're the power couple of English pronunciation, those two. They create that rhythm in music we were talking about. And the post gives some solid advice on how to practice them.
Right. They mentioned mimicking native speakers, like we discussed earlier, and also just listening to a lot of English, paying attention to how native speakers use stress and intonation.
Those are great strategies. And don't forget shadowing, which is really effective for practicing both.
Because when you're shadowing, you're not just trying to say the words right, you're trying to copy how the speaker's voice rises and falls, how they create that rhythm.
Precisely. It's like a full body workout, but for your pronunciation.
I like that visual. Now, shifting gears a bit to think about our listener, are there specific techniques or exercises you'd suggest for someone who really wants to improve their stress timing and intonation?
Well, looking at what you've shared, I think it'd be helpful to really break down sentences you use often and analyze where the stress falls, things you say every day, at work, that kind of thing.
So taking those common phrases or sentences and like dissecting them to figure out which syllables are stressed.
Exactly. And then you can practice saying them over and over, making sure you get the stress right. It can be helpful to record yourself, too, so you can compare how you sound to a native speaker.
That makes sense. And for intonation, I guess it's helpful to really tune in to how native speakers use their voices when they're expressing different emotions. Maybe even like go overboard with it at first, exaggerate those intonations just to get a feel for it.
That's a really good tip. Don't be shy. Play around with your voice. See what it can do. The more you practice, the more natural it'll become.
And it's important to remember that this whole pronunciation thing, it's a process, not something you achieve overnight. You'll have times when you mess up or get frustrated. The key is to be patient with yourself, keep practicing, and, celebrate all those little wins you have along the way.
Couldn't agree more. It's all about progress, not perfection. And the rewards of mastering English pronunciation, they're huge.
They really are. Being able to speak English clearly and confidently, it can open so many doors.
For sure. You can connect with people from all over the world, share your ideas, your stories, and really experience all the richness and diversity of English-speaking cultures.
It's pretty incredible when you think about it. Now, I know we touched on this before, but I think it's so important that I want to bring it up again. The blog post really emphasizes getting feedback on your pronunciation.
Feedback is like gold when you're learning a language. It's like having a coach in your corner, someone who can guide you and help you see where you can improve.
And it doesn't have to be formal feedback, from a teacher or a language partner. Like we said, record yourself, listen back, and be honest with yourself. There are also all those online tools now that can give you feedback on your pronunciation.
Exactly. There are tons of resources out there. Just be proactive and look for those opportunities.
And remember, feedback, even if it's tough to hear sometimes, it's a gift. It's a chance to learn and grow.
Absolutely. Take it in, learn from it, and keep moving forward on that pronunciation journey.
Now, before we wrap up this rhythm and flow section, I'm curious, what are some common mistakes that you see non-native speakers making when it comes to, stress timing and intonation?
One of the most common ones is stressing the wrong syllable in a word. A lot of times, that's because they're trying to use the stress patterns from their native language, which, often doesn't work in English.
Right. Different languages have different stress patterns.
Exactly. And then another common one is speaking in a monotone. Their voice doesn't go up or down, it just stays flat. This can make their speech sound really boring and even make it hard to understand what they're trying to say.
So paying attention to both, where you put the stress and how your voice goes up and down, that intonation, those are both really crucial for communicating effectively in English.
Absolutely. And you know what? Mastering these things can actually make speaking English more fun.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
Well, think about it. When you know how to use stress and intonation the right way, you can put more of your personality into your speech.
Mm.
You
And
can emphasize certain words to really get your point across and use intonation to show your emotions, your attitude.
it's like adding spices to a dish to make it taste better.
Exactly. It takes your English from bland to full of flavor.
I love that analogy. So it's not just about sounding more natural and fluent, it's about enjoying the language more.
You got it. And the more you enjoy it, the more you'll practice and the faster you'll improve.
That's a great message to keep in mind. So we've really dug into some key parts of English pronunciation, from the IPA and mimicking to stress timing and intonation. What I find really cool is that the Oxford Language Club post calls these techniques secrets to unlock better pronunciation.
Yeah, like a treasure map.
Exactly.
And it's true. These techniques, they can feel like hidden gems, especially for people who've been struggling with pronunciation for a while.
Yeah, like a light bulb going off. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from this whole deep dive is that to get better at pronunciation, you got to understand the why behind the how.
Absolutely.
It's not just about copying sounds without thinking. You need to get the principles of how English works.
For sure. That's what makes this blog post so good. It doesn't just give tips, it explains the deeper mechanics of pronunciation.
Right. It's like they're pulling back the curtain and showing us how it all works. And when you understand that deeper level, learning becomes more interesting and effective.
Exactly. When you get the why, the how sticks better.
It's like learning to ride a bike. Once you understand balance and momentum, it all clicks.
Great analogy. Another big takeaway is that there's no one right way to improve pronunciation.
Right. What works for one person might not work for another. It all depends on your strengths and weaknesses, your native language, how you learn best, even your personality.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to try different things, find what you connect with, and create your own practice plan that fits your needs.
Like finding the right key for the lock.
Exactly. And one final thought. Mastering English pronunciation, it's a journey, not a destination.
I think that's so important to remember. It's easy to get discouraged when you hear native speakers just flowing effortlessly, but they've had years and years of practice.
Right. And even native speakers are always fine-tuning their pronunciation. Language is alive, it changes, there's always something new to learn.
So it's all about enjoying the process, those small wins, and never giving up on getting better.
Well said. And remember, the goal isn't to sound exactly like a native speaker. It's about communicating clearly and confidently in a way that's true to you.
Such a good point. It's about owning your accent, being yourself, and using your voice to connect with the world.
Perfectly put.
Well, I think we've covered a ton today. We've explored the secrets to English pronunciation, that whole stress timing and intonation thing, and how important it is to find what works best for you and get feedback.
It's been a really eye-opening deep dive. I hope you feel inspired to keep working on your English pronunciation.
We're rooting for you. And don't forget, the most important thing is to have fun with it.
Absolutely. Enjoy the challenge, the journey, and keep exploring this amazing world of English pronunciation.
Until next time on The Deep Dive.
Thank you for joining me in this exploration of English pronunciation. Remember, practice makes perfect, and every effort you make brings you one step closer to fluency. Don't forget to apply these tips in your daily conversations and watch your confidence soar. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with fellow learners and subscribe for more language tips. Until next time, keep practicing and keep speaking.